You ever seen a man celebrate divorce with champagne inside a lawyer's office?
Yeah.
It's as disgusting as it sounds. The cork popped before the ink on the paper's even dry. Mark raised his flute like he just won the lottery, grinning so wide, the corners of his mouth twitched. His watch, brand new, loud, and pretentious, caught the fluorescent lights and practically screamed, "Money changers, people." He leaned into my ear too close, too smug, and whispered, "You were just a placeholder. Sarah, thanks for keeping the seat warm." He didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't care. He toasted the room as if everyone else there agreed with him. And honestly, the worst part was how normal he acted about it. Like discarding a wife of 10 years was just a business move on a Tuesday. What kind of man treats his marriage like a temporary job until his real life starts? We'll answer that and then some. They say hindsight is 20/20. It's if that's true. Then my marriage was a damn billboard of red flags I ignored when I met Mark. He wasn't rich, not even close. He worked part-time at an automotive shop while studying for his MBA. The richest thing about him was his delusion. He'd talk about when the money comes, like it was inevitable, not if when. But I believed in him back then. Belief wasn't stupid, it was love. We married in a rented garden with Costco flour, plastic chairs, and a pastor who arrived late because his kid had a soccer tournament. Imperfect, but it felt right. Then his father got sick. The estate, rumors started, whispers of a massive fortune waiting to move down the bloodline. Mark played it off, but I could tell those whispers hit him harder than any love confession ever did. Meanwhile, I supported the man, paid his loans when the collectors wouldn't stop calling, worked double shifts to keep the lights on. And when his father got worse, I moved into the guest room of that giant, cold mansion and cared for him like he was my own. I brushed his thinning hair. I read to him on the porch. I drove him to chemo when Mark claimed he was too slammed or too tired or had to network. Yeah, with his buddies at the bar. Funny how I was the one doing the caretaking. But Mark got all the sympathy. Then came the night his father grabbed my wrist with more strength than I thought he had left. "Sarah," he whispered, "you're the only one who doesn't want something from me." I didn't realize at the time how much weight that sentence carried. His father passed away 5 weeks later. The will hadn't even been opened yet, and Mark changed like someone flipped a switch in his skull. Suddenly he's lifting weights at 6 a.m. Never cared before. New clothes, expensive cologne, and that phone permanently glued to his palm. I'd say good morning and he'd grunt like I was interrupting his main character monologue. He started disappearing, random weekend trips with friends, late night meetings that smelled like perfume. My friends tried to warn me, but I defended him. God, I defended him like a damn lawyer. Because I thought struggle was what marriage was made of. Loyalty, sacrifice, patience, blah 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 blah. Turns out I was just auditioning for the role of temporary wife. Then one morning, no fight, no warning, no tear, as he walked out of our bedroom, placed a crisp stack of papers on the kitchen island, and said, "We're done." Irreconcilable differences. Irreconcilable differences. I baked bread from scratch and wiped vomit off his father's sheets. What was so irreconcilable? But I didn't get it. Not yet. You know what I did get? A Google notification that probate court was beginning for his father's estate. Timing is everything, especially when you're a coward with a plan. Mark wanted that inheritance clean, without a wife attached, without division, without legal claims. But he couldn't say that out loud. Couldn't say, "I need to dump you before the money hits my account." So he hid behind paperwork and phrases designed to sound reasonable. He packed his things with machine efficiency and moved out 3 days later. Not a single family member called me, not even a sipa. Text. Maybe they knew. Maybe they were relieved. Maybe they were just like him. Back in that fluorescent lawyer's office, champagne still fizzing, everything clicked into place like a bad puzzle. Mark toasted his future, his mistress, because yes, there was one texted him, hard to and me. I sat there stunned, silent, and humiliated. But humiliation doesn't last forever. Sometimes it turns into gasoline. Mark thought divorcing me before probate made him rich and free. What he didn't know, his father left behind more than money. He left conditions, ones that were about to gut Mark where it hurt most. The first punch wasn't emotional, it was financial. And it landed clean. 2 days after the champagne incident, my debit card declined at the grocery store. Not for something fancy, just coffee and almond milk. The cashier gave me that polite smile people use when they think you're broke but don't want to embarrass you. Try correct, she whispered. Declined again. By the time I got to the parking lot, the joint account was empty and the credit cards were locked. Mark froze everything without warning, like our entire marriage was a subscription he could cancel mid-month. And legally, he knew exactly how far he could push before it became fraud. Then came the formal notice. Temporary financial measures pending divorce proceedings. Translation: he's rich on paper and I'm screwed in real time. Within a week, I was out of the house we built together. Well, the house I emotionally built and he financially inherited the moment his father died. My new apartment had peeling wallpaper, a perpetually flickering bathroom light, and neighbors who smoked out the window like they were trying to manufacture their own fog machine. It wasn't poverty, it was humiliation he witnessed, and Mark wielded it with Olympic athleticism. But the town didn't need paperwork to know what was going on. Small towns run on gossip, and Mark fed it like a bonfire. He showed up at bars with a new woman, mid-20s, tan, lips like they'd been photoshopped onto her face. The mistress. Her name, I would later learn, was Tiffany, but Mark just called her Tiff, as if trimming off syllables somehow made her more luxurious. They didn't hide, they posed, they laughed, they kissed, with the enthusiasm of teenagers and the entitlement of villains in a Netflix drama. People stared at me in the grocery store like I was a cautionary tale. Don't marry beneath your ambition. Ladies, he might leave you once he hits the jackpot. When the movers came to finish packing the remnants of my old life, they left behind boxers labeled sentimental that Mark didn't care about. He wanted assets, not history. Thought inside those boxers were his old laptops, files, and a folder I recognized immediately, his MBA binder. It was where he kept business plans, networking, contacts, and spreadsheets about how he'd become wealthy. Except it wasn't spreadsheets now. It was emails. Emails that started 7 years ago. 7 years before his father died. 7 years of hotel receipts, vacations, sexts, passwords, joint clubs, gym memberships, gifts, restaurant bookings, and calendar invites with Tiffany while I was nursing his father to sleep and paying his debts. 7 years of cheating before the divorce, which meant the affair wasn't a fling, it was a strategy. At that moment, I wasn't sad. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't even angry. I was absolutely floored by the sheer calculation. This wasn't betrayal. This was premeditation. He hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for leverage. I was a scaffolding he planned to kick aside the second the building was finished. Then I found the final puzzle piece. A notebook entry dated 2 months before his father's decline that read, "Need a clean break before probate. No splits. No spouse. Timing matters." It wasn't just cold, it was logistical. My love story had been an item on his to-do list. Shock eventually dissolves into clarity, and clarity is horrifying without action. So I booked a meeting with a divorce attorney, someone I found online who had decent reviews and offered a free consultation. Her office was modern, tidy, minimalist, like good decisions lived there. I slid the binder across her desk, my voice tight. "This is all timeline proof. Affair finances, offshore accounts, you name it." She leafed through it with lawyerly calm. No gasp, no outburst, just efficiency. Then she sighed. "Sarah, legally, the inheritance isn't part of the marital estate. Unless his father had died significantly earlier during the marriage, you can't touch it. And the Aferuhuth estate is no fault. It's distasteful, but it doesn't entitle you to the money." "What about alimony?" I asked. "Possible," she said carefully, "but temporary. And Mark is hiding assets offshore. If he keeps paperwork clean, you're not seeing a cent of inheritance." He clearly planned this. Of all the sentences that broke me, it wasn't the one about money. It was the one about planning, because planning means intention. Planning means he meant it. Planning means I was never his partner, just a placeholder in a financial strategy box. The time I got back to the apartment, I couldn't cry. Even tragedy gets tired eventually. I sat in the dark, staring at a stack of legal papers, when it hit me, Mach 1. He got the mistress, the money, the freedom, and the narrative. I got a crappy apartment and bills. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It has a trapdoor, unknown number, local area code, the voice on the other end. calm, older, sharp. Sarah, my name is Harold Whitman. I was your father-in-law's personal attorney. He asked me to contact you privately. After the estate entered probate, my breath hitched. Private contact. After probate, why me? Harold paused. It concerns a clause in the will, one Mark knows nothing about yet. Oh, Mark, you should have never celebrated early. If you've ever had a moment where time slows down just to make sure you're paying attention, this was that moment. The voice on the phone was clean and conservative, the kind of tone that belonged to old money and mahogany desks. Sarah, he repeated, my name is Harold Whitman. I served as your father-in-law's personal attorney for over 26 years. He requested that I reach out to you privately upon the initiation of probate. Probate, not marriage, not death, probate. Mark might have understood legal strategy, but his father understood timing. I swallowed hard. Why me? Harold didn't rush. Men like him never do. Because you were the caretaker, and because he had reservations about his son's character. Reservations, that was lawyer speak for, your ex-husband is a greedy snake, Harold continued. If you're free tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I'd like to show you something. Discretion is important. Important? Discretion. My curiosity hit the ceiling. Get me the address, he said. Harold's office looked like it was ripped straight from an old courtroom drama. Dark wood, leather chairs, thick curtains that swallowed sound. I felt underdressed, just breathing in the air. He offered tea, of course he did, and then he slid a folder across the table with the kind of precision surgeons envy. Inside was a copy of the will, not the generic public one filed in detailed one. Your father-in-law, Harold began, was a very wealthy man. But more importantly, he was a very observant man. He loved his son, but was not blind to his greed. I blinked. Greed? That was sugarcoating it? Mark didn't just have greed. He had ambition with fangs. Harold tapped the document. He believed that if Mark inherited unrestricted wealth, it would amplify his worst traits. He feared he would hurt people. You, specifically. Me. Not the business. Not the estate. Me. For the first time since the divorce, I felt something that wasn't humiliation or rage, it was validation. Quiet, steady validation. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Because, he said, it would have changed Mark's behavior. And your father-in-law wanted to see who Mark would become without supervision. Spoiler, Mark failed the experiment. Then we got to the clause, and if revenge stories had theme music, this would have been the crescendo, section 9, paragraph. See? It even looked ominous. Harold read aloud, his voice crisp. My son shall inherit the entirety of my estate under one condition, that at the time of distribution he remains faithfully and happily married to his wife, Sarah Thompson. My breath froze. Married. Happily. Faithfully. 3 words Mark has never coexisted with at the same time in his entire adult life. But Harold wasn't finished. He cleared his throat and paced the sentence like a dramatic actor. Should divorce occur prior to probate due to infidelity, abuse, or abandonment, said estate shall bypass my son entirely. I stared at the page, rereading that line like it was in a foreign language. Bypass entirely. Mark had built his entire villain origin story around timing his divorce to avoid splitting the inheritance. Yet the timing was the trap. Wait, if the divorce is finalized before probate, I started, then Mark disinherits himself, Harold finished. Correct. And it says infidelity. It does indeed. And you told me on the phone you found evidence, 7 years worth of evidence. Actually, but here's the part that made my pulse spike. Harold flipped to the next subclause. In the event of such disinheritance, the estate passes to either A, the surviving spouse, if willing and of sound mind, Maija, unhinged, or B, to the Thompson Foundation, with Sarah Thompson appointed trustee until death. Translation: either I got it, or a charity did with me managing it. Either way, Mark didn't see a penny. The man divested his own son from $50 million and handed me the sword. And Mark had signed the divorce papers so fast he practically got papicutes thinking it made him rich. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just breathed slow and dangerous. Sarah, Harold said, leaning in, Mark intends to finalize this divorce before probate closes. If that happens, he triggers the clause himself. I blinked. so I don't have to stop the divorce. He shook his head. On the contrary, you must accelerate it. He must believe he has won. If he suspects anything and delays, he may attempt reconciliation to secure the estate. Reconciliation with Mark. The universe would implode before that word came out of his mouth. Harold raised a brow. Can you act defeated, Sarah? I nodded before I even thought. Because I had been defeated weeks, performing it would be easy, but pretending weakness to execute revenge, that was a role I could win Oscars for. We outlined the plan in silence, the room thick with strategy. My lawyer would appear discouraged. I would appear broken. No contest, no fight, no asset war. Just a woman waving the white flag as her husband sprinted toward the vault. Mark wanted speed, fine, I'd give him velocity. And when he crossed the finish line, he'd discover it wasn't the vault door. It was a trapdoor. As I left the office, Harold called after me. One more thing. Whatever you do, don't look triumphant. Let him think he beat you. Beat me? Mark hadn't even seen the scoreboard. He thought divorcing me was the final chapter, but we were only halfway through the book. Next, the courtroom defeat. The mistress, the signature, and Mark is celebrating his own financial execution. Some people think revenge is a sprint. It's not. Revenge is method acting. It's costume design. It's holding your breath underwater until the other person forgets you're down there. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Lisa Sharpbob, Sharper Energy. I explained Harold's plan in broad strokes, not the clause, just the strategy. She paused, eyebrows knitting. So let me get this straight. You want to lose? I want to lose loudly, I corrected. No fight, no demands, no delays. A slow grin crept across her face. If your goal is speed, surrender will do it. Mark will get cocky. Oh, he's already cocky, I muttered. He's probably practicing poses for his money printing machine. Lisa snorted. Then this is going to work beautifully. We rehearsed the performance. Shoulders slumped, voice small, no eye contact, eyes, nods, resignation. The key wasn't to look broken. It was to look boring. Narcissists need conflict the way plants need sunlight. No conflict, no interest, no suspicion. Mark wanted victory. I'd hand it to him on a monogrammed plate. Mediation felt less like a legal procedure and more like a staged sitcom where the writers had run out of subtlety. Mark arrived in a fitted suit, beaming like he was about to win a game show jackpot. Tiffany flanked him, wearing sunglasses indoors because the sun, apparently, lives in conference room lamps now. The mediator read through the asset split proposals. Mine was embarrassingly small. Mark kept smirking like he expected me to leap across the table screaming, "That's not fair." Instead, I just nodded, but Mark's single quotes' smirk flickered. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. The mediator slid the settlement toward me. "I know this is difficult, Sarah, it's fine," I whispered. Silence, the kind that punches harder than shouting. Mark blinked. No challenge, no negotiation, nothing. He cleared his throat, adjusting his Tigran conqueror energy, fading into "why is this too easy" unease. But ego always saves the day for idiots. His confidence rebooted, and he leaned back with a smug laugh. "You know, Sarah, this is for the best. You weren't built for the lifestyle that's coming." The lifestyle. God, he really believed money was personality. The mediator asked if I wanted more time to think. I shook my head. Just signed. Mark did a little exhale of pleasure. Yes, pleasure on, whispered to Tiffany. "Told you she'd cave." Cave, sure. Sometimes reaching the peak of the mountain requires crawling. If there's one thing side chicks love more than drama, it's an audience. Tiffany waited until the papers were mostly signed before pulling out her phone and opening Instagram. She posted a boomerang of her and Mark clinking coffees with the caption, "Taking out the trash." She tagged the city and the building. Of course she did. "Evil doesn't hide anymore," it advertises. Then she leaned toward my voice, sugary, words poisonous. "You'll bounce back. Women like you always do. Just on lower floors." "Oh shit, Joe's cute, I cap." My face neutral. If she wanted a reaction, she'd have to buy one. The day of the final decree was surreal. The courtroom was quiet, sterile, no music, no narration, no slow motion effects, just paperwork and consequences. The judge scanned the file, stamped. The decree said, the dissolution of marriage is granted. And that was it. 10 years, reduced to a sentence and an ink blot. Mark's reaction was immediate, too loud for the space, too happy for the moment. He fist pumped, like he was leaving a Buffalo Wild Wings after a playoff game. Tiffany squealed and hugged him. I swear I heard someone in the gallery mutter, "Bro, what?" But here's the thing about gloating. It blocks intuition. When you celebrate, you stop seeing. And Mark was blindfolded by champagne bubbles and Tiffany's lip gloss. Once outside, he called the executor, right there in the hall with zero shame.
No.
It's done. Debath finalized. When can we release the funds? He said it loud enough to make sure I heard. The executor must have said something bureaucratic because Mark laughed. Whatever. I handled my end. Tell probate we're all good. We, as if the universe had teamed up with him. He hung up and patted Tiffany's hip like she was a lucky slot machine. Come on, babe. Let's go get rich. They left the building like winners, in a commercial sunlight confidence delusion. I waited until they turned the corner. Then I smiled, small, controlled, predatory. Thought not because I won, but because they had no idea they'd already lost. Mark didn't realize that the second he celebrated being free and single, he activated the very trap his father built to punish him. He thought the will would make him rich. The will was designed to make him humble. Next up, the reading the lawyer, the mistress, the evidence binder, and the moment Mark learns that divorcing me wasn't the finish line, it was the detonator. If the divorce was a performance, the will reading was the finale at a fireworks show, except instead of colors in the sky, there were detonations in Mark's ego. We met in a private conference room at Harold's firm. Thick walls, thick carpet, thick anticipation, the kind of space rich people use to pretend they're not panicking. Mark walked in wearing a new suit, still with the tags, ironically dragging Tiffany like a trophy. He took one look at me and scoffed. What are you doing here? I could answer. Harold stepped in with that courtroom baritone that makes people shut up by instinct. Mrs. Thompson is here at the request of the executor and per language in the will. Mrs. Thompson. Even without meaning to, that title had teeth, but Mark frowned. But we're divorced. Harold didn't blink. We are aware. Everyone sat. Tiffany crossed her legs and pulled out her phone, scrolling with the confidence of someone who thought this was merely a paperwork formality before her sugar daddy cashed in. Harold began, reading slowly, formally, deliberately, because old money loves theatrics. I, Benjamin Alden Thompson, being of sound mind, declared this to be my last will and testament. The first pages were boilerplate. Assets, trusts, foundations. Mark smirked like he already saw dollar signs in the margins. Then Harold turned to section 9, and the air changed. It got heavier, like even the oxygen knew something was coming. Concerning my son, Mark Thompson, Mark Streeton. Tiffany perked up like someone had said photo op. My son shall inherit the entirety of my estate only if he is faithfully and happily married to his wife, Sarah Thompson, at the time of distribution. Silence, then confusion. Happily married, Mark repeated, like the words were faulty. Harold continued, slower, more surgical. Should divorce occur prior to probate due to infidelity, abuse, abandonment, or related misconduct, the estate shall bypass my son entirely. Tiffany snorted. What does that? And then the penny dropped. Nose crutch that anvil dropped. Mark's eyes widened, color drained. Reality set in like anesthesia wearing off after surgery. But we're already divorced, he stammered. And that was months ago. Harold didn't even blink, crept and filed under irreconcilable differences stemming from infidelity. Mark's voice cracked into a sound I'd never heard before, half gasp, half primal scream. That's bullshit. We didn't file infidelity. Harold tapped the second folder. In the court accepted additional evidence last week verifying infidelity during the marriage. That's when I opened my bag and slid the binder across the table, the one from section 2 with 7 years of receipt, emails, hotel bookings, and Tiffany shape lies. Tiffany's face turned to clay expression, collapsing into something between shock and self-preservation. Mark grabbed the binder and skimmed pages with trembling fingers. Every receipt was a landmine. Every timestamp was a dagger. You can't do this, he roared at Harold. Oh, Harold murmured calmly. Your father already did. Then came the kill shot. In the event my son fails to meet said conditions, the estate shall transfer to my daughter-in-law Sarah Thompson as sole beneficiary. Tiffany slapped a hand over her mouth. Mark slammed his palm on the table so hard the pens jumped. No, no, this is illegal. I'll contest. You may, Harold replied, but the contestation fees will come out of your personal funds as you are not a beneficiary. Translation: downgrade from trust fund prince to broke man with a lawyer bill. Mark's panic mutated into rage so quickly it was almost cinematic. He lunged for the binder, then for my arm, then for the will before two security staff stepped in and pinned him to the chair. You set me up, he shouted at me, eyes manic. Actually, I simply stopped helping him lie. Tiffany, meanwhile, was doing calculus at the speed of light. How old is Mark? How broke is it? How long can lip injections last without maintenance? She stood slowly, grabbed her purse, and said the most honest words she'd spoken the entire story. I didn't sign up for poverty. Then she walked out. No goodbye, no apology, not even a fake tear, honestly. Iconic. Mog tried to chase her, forgot about security, got blocked, tried to fight, got escorted out. It would have been sad if it wasn't poetic. Time passed, money transferred, lawyers finished the estate distribution. And one day, a wire hit my account with more zeros than I'd ever seen outside of movies. I didn't buy a yacht or diamonds. Vindication doesn't need glitter. I took my passport, booked a flight, and spent the next months eating pasta in Italy and learning how to be a person who makes decisions for herself. Mark, rumor has it, he tried to sue Tiffany for emotional damages. The case got laughed out of court. He works at a freight warehouse now. Minimum wage, steel-toed boots, night shifts. The mistress replaced him with a crypto guy who owns a jet ski. Upgrade, I guess. Daughters for Mark's father. Turns out he knew exactly what kind of son he raised. And he knew exactly who deserved the wealth built over a lifetime. Not greedy, not opportunistic, the patient. But here's the part no one saw coming. I didn't keep the full $50 million. I funded a scholarship foundation in his father's name to help kids whose parents never bet on them, because spite is satisfying. But legacy lives longer. If you're watching this thinking karma takes too long, remember you don't need to fight your villains. You just have to let them destroy themselves. If you want more stories where the villain writes their own ending, make sure you stick around.